for joining us. Thank you for your patience. We are waiting. We're going to begin in about 5 minutes. We're just trying to manage some technical difficulties. Ben, is that you who joined by phone?
Yes, this is Ben Wabaji.
Okay, perfect. Just waiting on Tsion, and we'll be ready to start.
Okay, no problem at all.
Tsion, thanks for joining us. I sent you my link, so I think Kim is gonna change it to your name.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to mute myself so you don't have to hear the noise in my house.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, I think we're gonna get started. Thank you everyone for joining us and for your patience as we worked out some technical difficulties. My name is Amika Riali. I'm the membership director at Law for Black Lives. We're super excited to have you all here for this conversation today. And we're delighted to have our partners at Baji here to give us just some context and an overview of the situation, a little bit of a historical context and the situation at the border, and some conversation about what's happening with asylum and some barriers to asylum. And today we have three brilliant folks from Baji. We will hear first from Ben Nduga Kabuye. He is the Research and Advocacy Manager at Baji. And then from Tsion Gurmu, the Legal Director, and then Tadios Belay, who's the Los Angeles Legal Clinic Coordinator. And so without further ado, I will turn it over to them just to give an intro to themselves and their work, and also their pronouns as well. So Ben, would you mind kicking it off for us, please?
Hey everybody, my phone is having a little bit of issues, so let me know if it's hard to hear me in any way. But my name is Ben. I'm with the Black Alliance for Just Immigration. I'm Research and Advocacy Manager here. And so I'll kind of give you an overview of some of the historical and political context that has led us to this moment and what's going on at the border and what's really going on to refugees and migrants around the world. We're particularly right now in a moment that's kind of shaped by the last 40 to 50 years of not only U.S. policy, U.S. foreign policy, but like the global political scene in many ways. And so some of this information, some of the things that many of you all may know through your work, but also just through your families, if you reflect on what happened in the last 20 years and what happened in the 90s and the 80s, and just everything kind of moving forward from the 60s. Because what the 60s and 70s created was conditions where marginalized communities from around the world, from the third world, what is considered the third world, and even within the United States, it was, as we remember, those massive social movements to address inequalities and injustice on so many different angles, whether for poor people, for women, for people of color, for colonized people. And so what the response to what they were met with in country by country, but from the West in general, was basically what we now know as imperialism and neocolonialism, whereas those movements were defeated, making the living situations in all of these countries, from Africa to the Caribbean to South America, more difficult for millions of people. And so just as far as policy-wise, we saw that after the 60s and 70s, the West put in what was called structural adjustment programs through the IMF, through any number of the global economic governing bodies. And what these structural adjustment programs did was they basically came to countries and they said, listen, to pay for roads and basic needs and infrastructure, you're going to need loans. And you can take those loans at extremely high interest rates from the U.S. And so country after country, when governments or politicians or leaders of movements refused that, they were overthrown. And what was put in place was governments who would accept these. So when these programs were put in place, these loans were then also came along with requirements to divest and cut any sort of funding and resources towards the basic needs of people in the countries that they were in, and to raise no taxes on businesses and corporations from the West. So you see, like countries like Haiti, where you see many refugees at the border, that was a country that saw massive loss in just the basic livelihood of people, where government after government that was put in place made it so that Haitian farmers couldn't farm, made it so that any number of sectors locally within Haiti couldn't survive. And so what you saw was American businesses, European businesses from around the world able to come into Haiti, set up shop, and sell basic goods to the Haitian people, who were now no longer producers. They were just consumers of foreign imports. And it just destroyed the infrastructure of the economy of that country. And along with these economic programs, we also saw massive military intervention. And just even the last 2 decades, many of us have saw the trajectory of the war on terror and what that meant for countries across Africa, what is considered the Middle East now, and even really Latin America as well, and in the Caribbean as well. So you see militarization, that the only resources the countries can spend on any social good is not on hospitals, education, healthcare, the basic needs that would make people not be forced into migration. What is being funded and what is being amplified is militarization, massive spending on militaries, policing, any sort of surveillance on the communities, and which is really to target and make sure that there is no other social movements that come out of these countries like we saw in the 60s and 70s that would challenge the global hegemony and require that countries and really the global world order is committed to the needs of basic people, and is in the hands of in the hands of people across the country or across the world. And so what the crisis that we're having in here today is that in recent decades, migrants from the Caribbean and Africa have been moving towards Brazil and South America, looking for work and employment, as their own countries have been further destabilized by the war on terror, by structural adjustment program, by extraction from the West. As countries in the Caribbean, people in Haiti find it harder and harder to live, they've gone to other countries looking for work, looking for opportunities. And you saw people moving into Brazil and other South American countries, even Central America, looking for work. And when that work was no longer available, were forced to leave Brazil and mass migrate all the way up to, to thousands of miles in an extremely unsafe and dangerous journey to the U.S. border. And of course, now that when they arrive, they're met with, what is increasingly what has always been an anti-immigrant policy in the United States, but has extremely become even more right-wing in many different ways. These conditions now put us in a position where we have a collective mandate as a community of people and as organizations across the country about what is the world and the vision that we want for each other and for ourselves, and are we committed to solidarity to marginalized communities. And so we have an opportunity now with each other, and as Tsion and Tadios are going to break down kind of the legal dynamic and what are the needs legally and what they've seen on the ground. This is, I think, an opportunity for us to remind ourselves of the traditions of our communities where we stood in solidarity with each other. There's a massive need for mutual aid and direct support to communities on the ground. That we have an opportunity now to stand and really put resources directly in the hands of refugees and migrants on the border, to supplement and amplify the networks of grassroots support that they're creating for themselves, and also to support organizations, a few Black-led organizations on the ground that are trying to marshal some sort of civil society response, whether that's Haitian Bridge Alliance or Partnership for New Americans in San Diego, or even here. I mean, I'm in New York, and many migrants, and many Haitians, when they are at the border, where they're sent to often is New York. And there's all these cities that are becoming feeder cities where people are, you know, being dropped off, and small organizations that have little to no support have to find a way to meet the need. And so organizations like Haitian Women for Haitian Refugees, we need to create an infrastructure of legal support, pro bono lawyers, medical support, so that we can really address the need, and not just for people at the border. The reality is, I believe, and Tsion and Tadios could speak more to this, but what is going on at the border, Black migrants at the border really are the canaries in the coal mine. These infrastructures of mutual aid and support is going to be needed for the many more communities, and often, you know, it'll be the communities that are in the mirror. It's going to be needed for ourselves pretty soon. And so I think this is urgent times, and we have an opportunity to rise to the occasion and really transform the material conditions of our people who are facing extremely difficult times. So that's all I have. Tsion will kind of break down and look into the legal situation and outline what she's seen at the border. But I thank you all for joining this call and really rising to the occasion of what this political moment is calling us to.
Thank you, Ben. That was really great and really informative. I am gonna hand it over to Tsion now, just to give us an overview of asylum and some of the barriers and just some of the legal issues that they're seeing.
Thank you, Amika. Hi, everyone. My name is Tsion Gurmu. I'm the legal manager at Baji. My preferred gender pronouns are she, her, hers. So as Amika said, I'm just going to provide a broad sort of overview of asylum, withholding, and protection under the Convention Against Torture, which are the forms of relief that most of the migrants who are currently at our southern border are seeking. Additionally, I will speak briefly to the legal challenges those folks are currently facing and what is preventing them from being able to access asylum. So let me just start with asylum. I think a lot of you on this webinar today are probably really familiar with this form of immigration relief, but for those who are not or who are just now learning about immigration law, I'll just give a brief overview of what asylum is and the different forms of asylum that folks are seeking currently, both within the US and at the border. So asylum is a form of protection that's granted to foreign nationals, either already inside the United States or folks at the border. Those are the folks that Tadios and I are seeing most often, who meet the international law definition for a refugee. So a refugee is a person who is unable or unwilling to return to their home country and cannot obtain protection in their home country due to the persecution that they were facing there, or due to a well-founded fear of future persecution if they're forced to return there. Based on one of 5 protected grounds, which is race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. Sort of the largest catch-all is membership in a particular social group. And so that can be constructed in many different ways to protect many different groups of folks. One example of a particular social group is gay men from Cameroon. That would be a grouping of individuals who may have experienced persecution in their home country based on their identity in that group. Folks can also seek asylum based on their membership in a particular social group if they are women, if they are individuals who've experienced domestic violence, if they're individuals who've experienced gang violence. So oftentimes attorneys and many volunteer attorneys like those of you who are on this webinar today, have to be really creative in how we structure particular social groups to sort of capture all of the new and emerging forms of violence that folks are fleeing in their home countries. And so we're happy to talk about that in greater detail in future webinars that folks can sign up for once you've decided that you're committed to volunteering, and we'll really delve into asylum law. But for now, I just want to discuss briefly the benefits of asylum and why folks are coming to the United States to seek this form of protection. So one major benefit of asylum is that it's a pathway to citizenship. For folks who are able to obtain asylum 1 year after they're granted, they're able to apply for a green card, and a few years afterwards, they are then able to apply for citizenship. That is what makes asylum different from the other forms of relief that we'll discuss, which are withholding of removal and protection under the Convention Against Torture. Those two forms of relief are also for individuals who are fleeing harm in their home countries, but they are not pathways to citizenship. This is what makes asylum really an ideal form of relief for a lot of folks, and it's also the reason why this government is currently attacking the asylum system and trying to block our folks from being able to access green cards and citizenship in this country. The asylum process can be accessed through one of two avenues. One is affirmative asylum, and the second is defensive asylum. Affirmative asylum is when folks who typically come into the country lawfully through a visitor's visa, for example, and then affirmatively let the US government know that I am here and I would like to remain in this country, and I'm seeking asylum affirmatively as a pathway to remain here. And so those folks' asylum applications are processed through US Citizenship and Immigration Services, which is the division of the Department of Homeland Security, also known as DHS. And so if they go through the affirmative pathway, then they're able to meet with an asylum officer in sort of an office setting, one-on-one, or with the assistance of a translator and an attorney if those individuals are present. And the individual sort of affirmatively goes through the process and will either be granted or referred to immigration court in order to determine whether they are eligible for asylum. So if the asylum officer deems that they can make a grant in that case, then they will grant the person at the asylum officer stage. And if the officer does not think that they're able to either grant or deny that individual, then it will be referred to immigration court. It's important to know that asylum officers do not have the power to deny a person asylum because they're not an adjudicator. So that case, if it is not granted, must be referred to immigration court, where then an immigration judge who is well versed in asylum law sometimes will make a decision about whether that individual can be granted. Unfortunately, the affirmative pathway to asylum is closing in. As many folks know, it is harder than ever to come into the United States lawfully, which is why a lot of folks have to find other means to enter the US. What is becoming an increasingly popular pathway, including for African and Caribbean populations who typically did not come this way, is coming through the southern border. And there are a myriad of reasons why that's happening, and I think Ben touched on a lot of them. But because of that, defensive asylum is increasingly becoming the only pathway to access the asylum system in the United States. So defensive asylum is for a person who is in removal proceedings, and they can assert that they are afraid of returning to their home country and then have access to the asylum system. Those individuals do not meet with asylum officers. They must meet with an immigration judge. Their only interaction with asylum officers would be at the first step, which is known as the credible fear interview, at which time you may explain to an officer the reasons why you fear returning to your home country. if the asylum officer, or at times Customs and Border Patrol officer, who hears your reasons for not wanting to return to your home country, determines that you do have what is known as a credible fear, then you will begin the asylum process and have the opportunity to make a full case for yourself in front of an immigration judge. If an individual is sort of denied at the credible fear interview stage, then it becomes very difficult to see an immigration judge and to be able to make a full case for yourself. For those reasons, and we'll get into this a little bit later, we are looking for volunteers who are able to assist in representing folks at every stage of the asylum process. Even that initial stage of the credible fear interview, it is becoming increasingly important that folks are represented at that stage because of the shifting dynamics of asylum law. Sometimes individuals are unprepared or don't know how best to articulate the reasons why they're afraid of returning to their home countries, and make sure that those reasons align with the current standing of our asylum law so that they can access this system. I'm just going to speak very briefly to some of the major challenges that we are currently seeing, particularly at the border, in terms of folks' ability to access the asylum system. So one step relates to what I was saying earlier about the credible fear interview. We are seeing that in the past, asylum officers who are trained in asylum law were the individuals conducting this initial interview with folks about their ability to enter the United States and sort of access our asylum system. Now we see that not only are asylum officers conducting these credible fear interviews, but there are also Customs and Border Patrol officers who are not trained in asylum law and sort of receive a crash course in order to conduct these interviews. They are also conducting these credible fear interviews, and oftentimes these folks approach this work with a very particular angle that may be different from that of asylum officers, and that sort of makes it more difficult for the asylum seeker to effectively make an argument for why they should be able to enter the US and access our asylum system. Second major issue that has risen as of this summer, July 16th, the Asylum Ban 2.0 went into effect. This is also known as the Third Country Transit Ban. Essentially, this ban states that individuals entering the United States or attempting to enter the United States through the southern border who have also passed through multiple countries in order to access the United States must show that they have applied for asylum and been denied asylum in at least one of those countries that they passed through on their journey to the United States. If they cannot make a showing that they applied for and were denied asylum in one of these countries that they passed through, then they are not allowed access to our asylum system. They are only allowed access to withholding of removal and protection under the Convention Against Torture, the two forms of relief that I alluded to earlier, which are not pathways to citizenship, but are simply ways to remain in the United States with employment authorization and sort of find a way to survive while you're here. It is not a means for an individual to feel stability in their status in the US, and certainly they cannot bring immediate family members to join them in the country. So again, those are the reasons why asylum is a much preferable form of relief. So in light of the asylum transit ban, we are seeing a lot of individuals who have traveled for many months and sometimes over a year to get to the US border, and then are being told that the form of relief that they came all this way to have access to, they no longer have access to. Additionally, the burden of asking folks to apply for asylum in the South American and Central American countries that they often pass through in order to get to the US border doesn't make a lot of sense for folks who do not feel safe or have language access issues or cultural sort of barriers to being able to resettle in those countries. Many of the countries that they're passing through do not have functional and fair asylum systems. In addition to that, the Black migrants specifically that Baji works with have often experienced very extreme anti-Black racism, harassment by the police, arbitrary detention, and other forms of violence that make it unsafe for them to seek refuge in those countries. And so Baji is part of a larger fight with a lot of other legal service providers to sort of overturn this newest asylum ban so that all migrants, and specifically Black migrants, are not forced to seek refuge in other countries where they are not safe. In the interim, our attorneys are trying to come up with really creative arguments for why the asylum ban should not apply to our clients. And if we're unable to sort of successfully make those arguments, then individuals are being granted withholding of removal and protection under the Convention Against Torture, which allow them to remain in the United States and hopefully will have the opportunity to reopen those cases in the event that the asylum ban is overturned. Additionally, I would like to talk about firm resettlement. Oftentimes when folks are being introduced to asylum law, firm resettlement issues are not necessarily part of the conversation because that was sort of a smaller niche issue that only applied to certain applicants. Unfortunately, we're seeing this becoming a larger and more prevalent issue, especially with Black migrants coming up through the southern border. The reason is many Black migrants are being held in Mexico specifically for extended periods of time. Often they're being held in detention for weeks, if not months, of that time that they're in Mexico as a whole. And the reason for that is we see that the border has extended down to basically Guatemala, where Black folks and all migrants really are unable to continue their way to the US border because the US government has currently placed a lot of pressure on Central American nations and specifically Mexico to absorb migrants before they get to the US border. And so one way that we see that happening is that folks are not able to travel freely in Mexico unless they can show some form of documentation or status in the country. Previously, folks were able to access visas that allowed them to move freely in Mexico in order for them to access the US border pretty easily upon entering Mexico. However, those visas are no longer being provided. Instead, folks are being pressured into either applying for asylum in Mexico or applying for legal permanent residence in Mexico. So having that form of permanent legal status in Mexico raises firm resettlement issues, which means that if an asylum seeker has already firmly resettled in another country other than the home country that they are fleeing, then the US government is much less likely to grant that individual asylum in the United States because they have firmly and safely resettled in another country. We know that folks are not making the active choice to seek status in Mexico and these other countries that they are passing through. Rather, they are being pressured and oftentimes sort of tricked into seeking these forms of permanent status. One major reason for this is that a lot of Black migrants passing through these countries do not speak Spanish and also are not able to understand the documents that they're signing. And so for this reason, they arrive at the US-Mexico border, sometimes already with legal permanent residence in Mexico. And so our attorneys need to be prepared to make creative arguments for why they should not be considered firmly resettled in Mexico and why they should be able to access the US asylum system. So those are just a couple of the major issues that have sort of cropped up in recent months in terms of the folks that we're trying to assist that are coming up through the southern border, as well as asylum seekers who've come to the US on visas. I would also like to state, and Tadios will speak to this a little bit more, but we are seeing, as folks enter the United States through the southern border, that they're being held in detention facilities for very extended periods of time. We have clients that have been held for 8, 9, 10 months. And we're really looking for attorneys who are able to be of assistance to us at any step in this process. So, for example, the credible fear interview would be an excellent time for attorneys to be able to assist telephonically and sort of help represent people in that way. Additionally, the longer term cases are an opportunity for folks to get involved. And then also applying for parole or bond so that folks are not being held in detention for so long would also be a great asset to us. I mean, we'll speak more in detail at the end about all of the opportunities to get involved, but I just wanted to sort of plant that seed in folks' mind that there are so many different ways to assist folks that are trying to access the asylum system in the United States, and some of them are an easier lift than others, and so just keep your minds open to the different opportunities and ways to get involved.
Thank you, Tsion. That was amazing. Now, before we open it up for questions, because I'm sure folks do have some questions, I just want to turn it over to Tadios to really give us a picture of like what he's seeing when he goes to the border monthly on his monthly visits, and just like what folks are facing and what's happening. So I will turn it over to Tadios now.
Thank you, Amika. Thank you, Tsion and Ben, for brilliantly, stating, the historical, context, as well as, the legal challenges facing, Black migrants and asylum seekers in Tijuana. So I will briefly, go over, the current situation, on the ground in TJ, and as well as, the, logistical issues for those of you who like to join us in, our upcoming legal, clinic trip to Tijuana. So as Tsion, mentioned a lot of times, what's happening at the border is, it's a human right, humanitarian crisis. I saw the raw pain of human beings, right? Just the basic necessities. They don't have access to food, no access to housing, and then I have seen the human suffering of our brothers and sisters, and they experience harassment, unlawful treatment, or even arrest and physical violence. Look, these people, the asylum seekers there are living in the most deplorable, the most horrid conditions. And they're forced to leave their countries because of, because of the reasons, that, Ben, was mentioning. And they're experiencing, they're experiencing, a lot of, violence on a daily basis, and their lives are under threat. Either from the drug cartels or even from the police officers in Tijuana. And then their lives are dependent on the volunteers who are traveling from American side, just to provide the basic necessities, like food, the basic legal service, just to provide basic legal information. And then still, thousands of Black asylum seekers, they're struggling, to find basic necessities, like food and housing. And some of them, they live in a hotel, and some of them, they live in a room. And then, but the majority of them, they don't have even the means to have basic like food. This is crazy. I mean, we can't tolerate this situation. And then, they left their country, like I said, it's because of, the very condition that, the United States and other, Western countries, created. And they don't have, meals. They don't have even waters, no drink. And then, so what's needed at this point is, especially, for Black migrants, because, they travel thousands of, miles, from Africa, from the Caribbean countries, from South and Central American countries. And they spend, most of, their money on their journey. They have nothing. Like a penny, they don't have money even, to buy a bread. So what we need at this point is, we need meals, we need drinks, someone who can contribute or donate, meals or drinks or sleeping tents or medical supplies or even, hygiene products or medical, supplies. We need also, translators who, speaks, Spanish or Portuguese or Tigrinya or Amharic or French or any other African, language. And again, Tsion also, brilliantly, studying, the challenge of, legal services, right? So we are running this project on volunteer base. I am the only paid staff member on Baji, and then Tsion also, who are, traveling to, the border and in Tapachula to provide this service. And we're dependent on, volunteers. We're dependent on, donations. And then Baji, is very committed, to help our brothers and sisters in Tijuana. We're, providing legal service. We're providing, humanitarian assistance. We're providing, medical assistance to our brothers and sisters. And then, we have started, fundraising. If you guys can help us, by, you can donate. We can, provide the link, by the end of this conversation. So we, those funds, will go directly to buy, meals, drinks, sleeping tents, medical hygiene. And this is a very difficult time, for our communities, both in the United States and at the border. And we ask you to stand with us. And we ask you to stand with the asylum seekers. These are the most desperate, human beings on the, on earth. They don't even have, food to eat. And they, travel thousands of, miles with their family members, with their kids. And we need to amplify, the works that we are doing at the border. And at the same time, we need to, uplift the experience of, Black migrants and asylum seekers. So we need your help. So for those of you who are interested to join us in our, next clinic, so our next clinic is on March 7th. I'll be the point of contact person at Baji. So we travel to the border at least, once in a month, the first Saturday of the month. So you can reach out to me at Tadios, which is my first name, at baji.org, or you can call me anytime, 310-867-1320. So if you are interested to join us, what you need to bring is, you need to have, valid passport or ID. Like, some kind of, document, government, documentation. And in terms of, time commitment, so we leave early in the morning, at least, by 6 from here, from Los Angeles. And it takes, about 2 hours from here to get to the border. And so we'll start, the training, the medical, the medical support, the humanitarian support, as soon as, we get there. Right, so if you are interested to join us, please contact me so we can, provide the much needed, legal, medical, and humanitarian support to these desperately, impacted, human beings. So maybe, Tsion can also give us, more information, or Amika can give us, more information about, the about the logistical, staff, what you need to bring, if there's any kind of, training before you come. So we can go over that, after, or by the, the end of this conversation. But, like I said, this is a very difficult time. So because I'm always there, at least once in a month, I see the human suffering. So if you guys can help us, please, this is the right time to support the Black asylum seekers. And then, there is a lot of, discrimination even within the immigration system, within the, the legal service system. So we are asking you to stand with us, to stand with, the Black asylum seekers. And then if you have any question, I'll be happy to answer those questions. And thank you.
Thank you, Tadios. I think it would be great to open it up to questions now for folks who have them, for either you or Tsion. Ben had to jump off the call, but I'd love to just open it up to questions if anyone has anything that they want to ask either Tsion or Tadios. And you can just unmute yourself, unless you're on the phone, and then it's *6.
I have a question.
Okay.
I know you guys are looking for volunteer. I'm a new attorney. I'm very new, don't know much. I wouldn't mind helping, but I'm out there in Florida. So like, if you want to help on a case, I mean, actually this question is for Tsion. What would be, and first of all, I have to say too, I really appreciate the way she explained her, the affirmative and defensive asylum. It's really informative, and I feel like I can learn a lot from her. If she doesn't mind helping me out more, teaching me more, that would be great. But what is the best way that if you live out there in Florida, not at the border or nothing, but how can one help?
Thank you for your question. Really excited actually to answer that. So we are very much open to helping train folks who have little to no experience in immigration law. Like I said before, there are so many opportunities and small pieces of each case that different folks can take on in order to provide full representation all around for as many folks as we can. So remotely from Florida, you would be able to potentially represent folks during their credible fear interview or reasonable fear interviews. Sometimes folks are moved from what is a credible fear interview, which has a lower threshold in terms of showing how likely it is that you would be harmed if you were to return to your home country. And they make go through a little bit more rigorous of an interview process, which is known as the reasonable fear interview. And that is for individuals that they just don't think can access the asylum system, either because of the asylum ban or due to other reasons. And so our folks in the credible fear interviews, but especially our folks who are subject to reasonable fear interviews, could greatly benefit from an attorney who would help prepare them for that interview. And so telephonically, basically, we would connect you with someone in detention who expects to have one of those interviews in the coming days or weeks. And you would prepare them by letting them know what questions they will likely be asked, and we will, train folks in sort of helping you to understand what the scope of that interview is so that you can properly prepare someone. But you would prepare that person, go over the questions with them, help them understand sort of the legal standards that they're being held to during the course of that interview, and how best to express their narrative so that the asylum officer understands the reason why, or the CBP officer understands the reasons why they should be eligible for asylum or withholding or protection under the Convention Against Torture. So that's work that really anybody can do anywhere in the country. and telephonically we would just connect you to someone in detention who needs preparation for that interview. And if you were interested in continuing with that person after they pass, ideally they pass their credible fear interview or reasonable fear interview, and you say perhaps wanted to prepare a parole application for them so that they can get out of detention, you could also do that work remotely. And so we plan on working with Law for Black Lives to set up a series of webinars following this one for individuals who are interested in volunteering, so that you can be prepared to do that work with, particularly with folks who are detained. So we'll have webinars set up for credible fear and reasonable fear interview prep, webinars for bond applications, webinars for parole applications, and also webinars for individuals who are interested in taking on a full defensive asylum case.
That's interesting. I mean, yeah, that's something, although I'm working full-time at my job, but I'd love to, I mean, at least take one, first of all, attend the webinar. I'm not sure what's the requirement to attend the webinar. I guess you're just saying you do them, but I don't know if there's a fee or something to do that, and go on and take at least, I can do telephonic, the questions, the preparation for them telephonically, but I'd love to take at least one case just to see how it is. Maybe in the future I can take more, but at least start with one and see how that works.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. We really welcome folks to get involved at any level that makes sense for you personally. We understand that everyone has really busy personal and professional schedules, and so we can break the cases down piecemeal so that it makes sense for you. Also, all of the webinars that we will be hosting moving forward will be 100% free and just open to folks who are getting involved. Even if you don't know if you can definitely volunteer for sure, the webinar is a good opportunity to just get an idea of what the time commitment might be, and then you can make a decision from there.
Yeah, I'm interested. I mean, I don't know if I should give my email, or what information should I give, or who should I contact to get more information, I would say, and then get involved with get the webinar information and get that going, because that's one area of the law I'm interested to learn. I've been reading a lot about affirmative and defensive asylum. I have folks approach me about asylum, but I don't know how to help them. When I see this webinar today, I said definitely I'm going to attend. So, and yeah, that's why I'm here today, just to make sure I learn. And because I'm from Haiti, I have lots of folks from Haiti who are seeking asylum, but I don't really know anything about it. So I think that would be really helpful. That way I can help them.
So I'm gonna, this is Amika, I'm gonna ask that Tsion and Tadios put their email in the chat box, and it'll pop up and you'll be able to get their email.
Sure.
And then also, when we will send out after this, after the webinar is over, we'll send out a link to the recording, and we can also send out in the email just something that has contact information for Tsion and Tadios.
Sure, that would be great.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for your question. Does anyone else have a question for Tsion or Tadios?
This is TL. I want to offer thanks and gratitude for your work and for offering the information that you shared tonight. I want to offer, if you all have any disabilities or deafness that you come across, that you could reach out to me. But I'm also more interested in joining future webinars, learning more about immigration law, try to bridge the divide between folks who are in disability justice and disability rights work and migrant justice work. So please feel free to contact me, and definitely put me on to the future emails or information coming out. yeah, I'm down. So thank you again for your work and your service.
Thank you
Tia.
for saying that, because that's actually an area that we don't have covered at all. So we will take you up on your offer. So thanks.
Thank you for your question.
Yeah, thanks, Talia. Talila. Yeah, we have also, disabled, asylum seekers in Tijuana. So I, will definitely, reach out to you, Talila, after this, webinar.
This is Till. I think what we should probably discuss is like a joint webinar on disability and asylum justice issues, because it's a problem.
Yeah.
Obviously, disability is used specifically to deem folks as inapplicable, even though it should be a category that should allow for asylum. So I think it's worth collective conversation and education around.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Tia, would you mind like in the chat sending your email directly to Tsion and Tadios? Thank you.
Yeah, and I have also shared, the link to donate to Banji. If you guys are, interested to donate to our, border work, you can donate, using the link that I shared, on this, on the chat. So if you go to, the chat link on the chat, you can see the link to donate, for, our work.
Thanks, Tadios. Are there any other questions? Are folks curious about anything or want to raise up any issues?
Yes, hi, I'm Jennifer. Thank you so much for the information you shared. It was so clear, Tsion. I haven't heard anyone explain so well the process. I'm wondering if there's any non-lawyers can do, and you have to be entered into the federal court system to be able to be helpful in immigration at the border. And are you any other location at the border besides Tijuana? I've been hearing about issues at other spots along the Texas border.
Jennifer, it was hard to hear you, but I think I heard you ask, is there anything that non-lawyers can do? Do you have to be like admitted into federal court or some? I think that's what I heard. And then there was a third question. Did you hear it, Tsion?
I'm not sure that I heard it either. I'm sorry.
Sorry, are you at other locations along the border besides Tijuana?
Thank you. She said, are you at other locations along the border besides Tijuana? So are there things that non-lawyers can do? Do you need to be entered into or associated or affiliated with the federal court in any way? And are you at other places along the border?
So, and Tadios can elaborate on this, but the individuals that come to our monthly workshops in Tijuana are not always attorneys, and they do not have to be. Those individuals are doing credible fear and reasonable fear interview prep with folks on the ground and letting them know about this process before they enter into the United States, because we recognize that it can be difficult to do that work over the phone while folks are detained. And sometimes, although this is less common now, but sometimes folks have those interviews really rapidly once they enter detention. And so we really have to do that prep while we still have them in person in Tijuana. And so you are free and welcome to join any of our border trips, and you do not have to be an attorney to do so. Additionally, doing the telephonic prep with folks who are detained in the United States. You do not have to be an attorney to do that either. However, you will not be able to sort of be on the phone and telephonically represent that person during the course of the actual credible fear interview or reasonable fear interview if you are not an attorney. But you will have been able to do all of the prep and really put them in a position where they can succeed on their own. So those are two ways to get involved, both in Tijuana and the United States for non-attorneys. In terms of like where you're barred, because immigration law is federal, you can just be barred anywhere and engage in this work. And then to the last question about other border cities, Baji is not currently consistently at another U.S. border, like Mexico-U.S. border city, other than Tijuana. We do go to Tapachula regularly, but Tapachula is a city at the border of Mexico and Guatemala. And the reason that we are there is because we want to receive folks when they first enter into Mexico and sort of let them know that they should not be coerced into either applying for legal permanent residence or asylum in Mexico, and sort of present the dangers that that may or the consequences of applying for those forms of relief, how that may then affect their U.S. asylum claims. We also do humanitarian work there as well. So if you are ever interested in going to Tapachula with us, we are open to that as well. However, you know, that's really deep into Mexico, right at the border with Guatemala, so it's a much more sort of intense trip. And Tadios, feel free to add anything that I may have missed.
Yeah, I think you said all, everything. So I think in terms of volunteering, with us, you don't need to be, an attorney. If you're an attorney, which is great, right? I'm not an attorney, but I went to law school. I have a good understanding about the U.S. immigration laws and policies, right? But I don't practice immigration law. But I coordinate the program. I recruit pro bono attorneys or law school students. So it doesn't matter whether you are an attorney or not. Even if you are a law school student, you can still help us, right? So you can prepare the asylum seekers with a lot of things, the credible free interview. What are the grounds, for asylum? The basic, thing of asylum, asylum 101. You can also do that, so you don't need to be an immigration attorney. But if you have a license or, if you practice immigration law, that would be a huge help for us, because, we have thousands of, asylum seekers at the border, as well as, in several immigration detention centers, across the country. So feel free to reach out to us again, to Tsion or myself. You can help us in any way. So it doesn't matter, whether you have, license, or whether, you are experienced or not, as long as, you have the passion, the commitment to help us, please, reach out to us.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
And one last thing that we probably didn't give enough attention to is folks with language skills. A lot of our attorneys speak many different languages. However, as I said before, the folks who are currently at the southern border, it's becoming a more and more diverse group, and we're encountering new languages every day. So if you do have any language skills, it would also be fantastic if you reached out to either Amika or myself or Tadios and sort of let us know what your language skills are, and perhaps there's some way that you could be helpful, regardless of whether you want to go to Tijuana or if you just want to help with documents that we need to translate into English here to support folks' asylum cases. Any support that you could provide would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you. Do other folks have questions? Okay. So then I would love if we could close out our time together by just sort of recapping some of the opportunities that are available to folks. I have put my email, as well as Tadios and Sienna put their emails into the chat box. We'll also send out this recording with all emails and contact information. But I'd love for the two of you to just recap what the opportunities are to get involved and what some next steps are.
Hi, everyone. So just to recap some of the volunteer opportunities that I spoke to earlier in the webinar, we would greatly appreciate folks who can do credible fear interview and reasonable fear interview prep in Tijuana, and I'll let Tadios speak more to that. We also have a second opportunity for folks to do that credible fear and reasonable fear interview prep remotely here in the US for folks who are in detention centers really across the country. The third opportunity would be to do parole requests, which can be done remotely as well to get our folks out of detention so they're not sort of languishing away in there for several months. A fourth opportunity is for folks who are eligible for bond, which is a smaller population of folks, but those bond eligible folks do need representation in their bond hearings. That work cannot be done remotely, but we would greatly appreciate anyone who can assist in that way. And the fifth opportunity is to take on a defensive asylum case. I know that that could seem really intimidating, especially for folks that don't have a great deal of experience practicing immigration law. However, we are here to provide you with support, trainings, samples. You are not alone. If you choose to venture into that work, we will be there with you at every step. And you would be surprised how quickly you can sort of learn how to take on these cases, and we can really amplify the work that we're doing with the support of volunteers like yourselves. So if you have any questions about any of those 5 opportunities, I dropped my email in the chat box. Please feel free to email me. Or I'll also put my number there so that we could have a phone conversation if folks prefer. And Tadios, if you want to speak a little bit to Tijuana, that would be great too.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Tsion. Yeah, so there are a lot of opportunities to engage with us in providing different kinds of service to the asylum seekers. One of the opportunities, of course, the border work. We're going to the border on March 7th, which is the next border trip. So we'll be traveling to TJ or Tijuana early in the morning at 6. If you guys are interested to join us, please reach out to me. I've already put my contact information, my email, and my phone number on the on the chat box, so you can reach out to me. But if you're not available, I know this is a short notice because March 7th is next week, right? So you can still join us for April 4th. So remember, our clinic is the first Saturday of every month. So you can join us, during our clinic border work. So the next, March 7th, if you guys are available, March 7th, I'd be happy to take you down to TJ. Okay, if not, April 4th will be the next opportunity for you guys to to support these desperately yeah, it's crazy. So please reach out to me if you guys are really interested to support our work in addition to the legal support, right? So Tsion has already discussed that. So yeah.
Tadios, do you all have the May date ready as well?
Yes, so the May date would be okay, so May 2nd.
May 2nd, okay.
Yeah. So first Saturday of every month, Baji alongside with a lot of, organizations and volunteers, we lead, a delegation to the border to provide not only legal service, but also, humanitarian assistance, medical assistance. If you guys have, friends or family members who are, medical doctors or nurse practitioners, or somehow, if they have, some kind of, support, please let us know. So, we're trying to build, a support system and infrastructure for, for our community.
Thank you, Tadios. I do want also just to add that Law for Black Lives is providing resources to cover the cost of trips that folks, if you volunteer to go to the border on one of the legal clinic trips, we are willing to cover the cost of your travel for the April 4th or the May 2nd trip. And when we follow up on this webinar, we'll also put that information in email so that you can contact us and let us know so that we can work with you to get all of that squared away. We are at the end of our time together, but we do have some time left. So if folks have comments or lingering questions, please offer those up now.
This is TL. Can I just get clarity from one of you all on whether the clinic and the trip to Tijuana is the same day and time, or if there's these clinic opportunities is separate from the trip? Can someone clarify that, please? Go ahead.
Tadios, do you want me to take it, or would you like to take it?
I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah. I think I was muted. Yeah. So you can take it, or I can give them, brief, information about the, the trip.
So the clinics are the reason for the trip to Tijuana, where both like legal assistance as prep for the credible fear and reasonable fear interviews happen, as well as the medical assistance and the food and other things. So lots of things happen, but the clinics are the reason for the trip to Tijuana.
Yeah. So just, to add, a few points on that, so we'll be, leaving from LA. Let's say if you're coming next, next Saturday, right? Or March 7th, right? So we'll be leaving from Los Angeles if you're coming to LA. So we usually, rent a car from here, like a van, or depending on, the number of, volunteers, right? So we leave from here at 6 a.m. in the morning, and then we'll be driving to the border, which, takes probably 2 hours drive from Los Angeles to get to the border. And then the training, the legal clinic, yes, the trip and the legal clinic are happening the same day, the same time. So the training will take place at a place called Plaza Viva Tijuana. Plaza Viva Tijuana, which is in Tijuana, which is actually, right across the U.S.-Mexico border. So when we cross the border, our office is right across the street. So the immigration clinic or the clinic will promptly start at 9 a.m. and will be done by around like 2 or 3 p.m. Okay, so you should expect to stay in Tijuana at least until 3 or 4 p.m. depending on the number of asylum seekers, or depending on the time that we are spending, right? So and then also when we come back, there is like a long line, a long inspection line, at the border, which probably takes 1 to 2 hours, and again depending on the date. And then we'll be back to LA around like 7 or 8 p.m. So, but again, if you guys are interested, I'm sure, the Law for Black Lives, or America, will provide you, a detailed information, and she will give you, more information about, the clinic.
This is TL. Thanks for clarifying. Appreciate that.
No problem, Talia. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Tadios. for filling in the blanks for me.
No problem.
Okay. If there are no more questions or comments, and folks have had time to get the information off the chat, which we will include again in the follow-up email. So if you didn't write it down, we got you. We're going to send it to you with a link to this, the recording of this webinar, along with everyone who registered. Thank you, Baji. Thank you, Tsion. Thank you, Tadios and Ben, who's not with us, for your work. Thank you, everyone who engaged in this conversation today and who remains curious about what we can do to help.
Thank you all.
Yeah,
Thank you all.
Thank you for your time.
Bye. Good night.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good night.